I want to talk about something that's very creepy that I've discovered about Swedish culture, and this is for the sake of not only all of you Swedish people, but also everyone that can learn from you. Did you know that Sweden has some of the highest private debt in the whole world? They also have a gambling epidemic in this country. Swedish people made all drugs illegal except for smoking, caffeine, and alcohol. Alcohol is something that they've put a state monopoly on because they want to combat alcoholism. Despite this, there is not too much difference between Sweden and other countries when it comes to alcoholism rates. The state monopoly does nothing. And this isn't something you'll find in any statistic or report, but Sweden has an alcoholism culture. They are known for getting way too drunk every weekend to the point of near toxicity. Swedish people drink so much that it is dangerous and unhinged. Talk to Swedish people and nearly everyone has an anecdote about work parties going way too far. You know, the boss of all people starts getting up on the table, dances, and tries to bang numerous of his co-workers, maybe even cheats on his wife. That's common in this country. There's even a cultural meme where if you say, "I was drunk," you can get away with murder. Almost. You can get away with nearly anything by saying, "I was drunk." They're extremely unhealthy when it comes to money and drinking. Now, why is that? Well, I think I've identified a few factors which make the culture extremely toxic and prone to these behaviors. Namely, with the alcohol, you can tell that Swedish people are so antisocial that they don't even say hi to their neighbors. Making small talk is so difficult in this country. I've come across migrants that have lived here for 10 plus years and don't even know how to speak the language because they don't know how to make friends with people because no one wants to be friends with them. This isn't necessarily one of those racism issues because if you're a Swedish person, you probably have the same thing to say. You've probably noticed yourself how difficult it is to be a Swede that doesn't fit in Sweden. You have a lot to relate to when it comes to immigrants. They see the same thing. Now, the antisocial, emotionally repressive climate, you'll notice that this country is extremely silent, extremely difficult to get close to people, extremely difficult to socialize in any healthy manner. This isn't because they're evil, it's because they are scared. Half of them are genuinely obnoxious, and the other half is just scared because they know what the first half is like. So everyone kind of tiptoes around each other. And I know this because when I've actually managed to do some small talk with Swedes, get them to open up, something huge pours out. It's like the person has been longing for emotional and social connection their entire life, longing for someone to just share all of their innards with. It's actually funny because I've noticed this when I was working. It is difficult to get close to Swedish people, but once they consider you a friend, they are known for oversharing. So you're dealing with two extremes here. They are emotionally and socially incompetent because they are a peasant folk that became rich. So really they're acting like a lot of Western people who grow up with baby boomer parents. Their parents spoiled them because they believe that you show love through hard work and by buying and providing your children with everything. At first glance, that looks virtuous. It's not. Spoiling people messes them up for life and gives them weird standards of not only what to do with money, what money is, but also how to relate to other people and difficulties in life. So emotional constipation arises. They're not handed the emotional and social tools that come from not being isolated and experiencing uncomfortable and difficult things in life. They shield themselves off from everything that is uncomfortable and unpleasant. Swedish culture is about pretending to be perfect and always happy. So you can probably guess by now that the suicide rates are actually quite high. This is a country where scientists have discovered that loneliness and isolation is as unhealthy for you as smoking. and yet they will defend their loneliness and isolation because it's our traditions. No, it's just your habits. There's a difference. And they're bad habits. Because this need to always look good, always look like you have things figured out, never be vulnerable, never be uncomfortable, never be emotional, always act like you're happy, because otherwise people start mocking you for it. Like, why are you angry? Why are you so butthurt? Why are you so... That happens a lot. Vulnerability is mocked by those who are the most vulnerable. What this leads to is people getting kind of addicted to a few things, being they take a lot of loans so that they can have a lavish lifestyle, or just buy things that they think they need because they're afraid of loss, they're afraid of other people looking down on them, they're unwilling to acknowledge how unhealthy their surroundings are. And their addiction to always being happy leads to quite a few dysregulated behaviors related to dopamine and serotonin. They drink too much, they don't allow themselves to process the negative, truly process it without becoming cynical. They don't process negatives with vulnerability, and they take a lot of loans and they gamble a lot and they drink a lot and they pretend to be happy when they're actually quite alone existentially and don't know how to exist. So if you've lived in this country, you'll notice that every time you turn on the TV or even try to watch YouTube, the ads related to gambling are so frivolous that you can probably see 15 of them in the span of 10 minutes. Try watching the TV and count how often ads and loans and interest-related stuff is on the television. Advertisers know about the dark subconscious of the people. That's what they target in order to make a profit. Advertising, banking, entertainment, those industries are very parasitical. So when you look at the TV, pay attention to what is being advertised. Count how often it is being advertised. Did you know that advertisement as an industry was pioneered by Sigmund Freud's nephew? Psychology and advertisement have a very creepy history together. Look it up, please. Do the research. It's gonna save your life. Hopefully a little bit of it. Sigmund Freud is not a very good psychologist. He was a cokehead opiate addict who actually sexually exploited his female patients, and his theories about the subconscious were largely projection. The subconscious is not some dark place filled with human secrets. It's just filled with repressed, unfiltered information, but also just a lot of sensory information. The subconscious is not mystical. Nowadays, scientists are talking about intuitive intelligence to get away from the idea where all the false myths about the subconscious have been created. Now, you might think I'm derailing from the topic. No. Count the advertisements. Alcohol, loans, banks with good interest rates. It's reoccurring in this country for a reason. And the reason why other countries can learn from this is no matter if you're coming from the Balkans, the West, the north of Europe, where Sweden is, our parents might be the best people, but they did not have a lot to work with. They were forced to work to survive. They didn't master the skills of emotional and social tools to teach people how to process difficulties through their language and their hearts. Maybe if they had a good religious upbringing, but there's also such a thing as a bad religious upbringing, where people preach a lot of things they don't practice. So I see something that combines both my people in the Balkans with baby boomers in the West with Swedish people in general. A sterile middle-class environment is something that a lot of people come from, and typically they develop the stereotypical problems of being a rich kid without necessarily being rich. They might have anxiety disorders, anxiousness. They don't have accentuated financial literacy. They're not necessarily good with money. They're spending a lot. They're not saving up constructively for the future. And even if they are, they might be lacking the emotional and social tools to be genuinely healthy, genuinely stable, and genuinely free from vices. So something that's happened a lot in this country over the past years is it's becoming apparent how many people use drugs. Swedish people love cocaine, they love amphetamine, they love smoking weed, and it's not because there's more immigrants in this country that can supply what the market demands. It's the fact that the market, the people, do demand it. They demand various forms of numbness because it's not healthy to always be happy. It sounds weird to you, but becoming anti-fragile might be a better way of getting to the point of what people consider happiness. People who are addicted to being happy don't take the time to really get in touch with themselves in a way as what to process. Take nightmares, for example. People resent nightmares, think that they're bad. Well, actual sleep science says that nightmares are very healthy. It's important to have them because if you don't have the vernacular or the psychological education to process things that you have been through or realize things in your waking state that you need, your body does. Your intuitive intelligence does. It knows how to do those things better, at least when you're sleeping. The point of dreams is to filter the subconscious. Even the bad dreams are important. When you smoke a lot of weed, it suppresses your dreams. And even if weed can be good for some people, never having nightmares, never having dreams, isn't. It blocks the processing abilities in mind and body. The most value and growth I've ever gotten in life is through various forms of suffering and difficulty. Those tough periods that everyone is afraid of, everyone resents when they're going through them, that everyone has a tendency to look at as unfair, blame everyone else but themselves, those toughest periods can be the most enlightening if you know how to handle it. You can look honestly at everyone else and say, yeah, that was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong, that person is an asshole, that wasn't good, that person is maybe not an asshole, but they're definitely damaged, probably shouldn't be around them. Good friend-ish, but not good enough. You get the picture. You can do all of that. You can list all of what's wrong with your surrounding, but sooner or later you're going to have to come to the question of, what could I have done better? What could I have done to improve and sharpen my intuition so that I didn't place myself in that situation to begin with? How can I take radical responsibility for myself and my well-being enough that I can start trusting myself as to how to actually make better decisions in life? This is not an intellectual process. This is not something you can be smart and study yourself to. This is time that you need to take for yourself in a small period of isolation. You shouldn't be too isolated, of course, but taking the time to actually allow yourself to feel the pain and then view it as a symbol, reflect, what is it trying to tell me? What is all this anger and this violent imagery and these revenge fantasies? What is all this sadness? What is all this blame actually trying to tell me? What can I learn from it? What does it represent? Yes, I can blame other people, but ultimately I'm going to have to look at, why didn't I do better sooner? At that point, you might not even blame people anymore. You might just start to feel pity for them. And that's good because it teaches you to eventually feel pity for yourself. Not pity in the sense of developing a victim mentality, but pity in the sense of caring about yourself like you would care about someone else. There's a trick I often tell people who suffer from being too nice, not having good boundaries. Take whatever situation you are in life. If you don't feel like you have a good judgment, if you feel like you're continually making mistakes, never being happy enough, never learning enough, university and classes might not be the way to go. Instead, try to actually learn what compassion is. you can't be nice to other people without being nice to yourself first. You just end up becoming unhinged and irrationally self-sacrificial and easily guilted. So you have to learn how to be nice to yourself first. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's a trick you can build off of. Take any situation in life and imagine, what would I tell a friend if they were in my situation? What would I tell someone I really love and really care about? What should they do? And then you start to notice that what you would tell them is very different from what you would tell yourself. If you have bad self-esteem, bad capability of judgment or setting boundaries, you realize that the narration you have towards yourself in your head is very different from what you tell other people. And what you tell other people, without realizing it, is often the advice that you need for yourself. So taking the time to actually ponder on how misconstrued your compassion can be, how unbalanced it is towards yourself in relationship to others, can be at least a good starting point for understanding that I don't care about myself, and I don't know how to take care of myself, and I don't know how to be nice to myself, and it is scary because I've grown to accept it and internalize it as just another flaw, and I think it's always going to be this way because everyone has flaws. No. You can tell yourself that and you'll never develop as a person and actually learn life skills, which is completely separate from 8, 9, or 12 different intelligences that exist. And if there's anything I learned from all the talk about multiculturalism and diversity, it's that when it's practiced right, you can actually learn a lot from each other and people can complete each other. But when we fool ourselves as Western citizens that individualism is a virtue, we're really just accepting the fact that we are alone, disconnected from our communities, and don't know how to ask for help. Because a lot of us try talking to psychologists that are often in the category of intelligent people who don't know how to live life. So no wonder they don't help you. No wonder they make things worse. No wonder they can't tell you anything. But there's actually a lot of smart people who can use it for good. If you look up a shrink with an actual impressive resume, credentials, you'll notice that it's someone who combined their intelligence with their heart, which enforces both. They don't think of intelligence as a virtue. The best shrink I ever had was a grandpa. He wasn't intimidated by my intelligence, like the other shrinks were. He wasn't offended by it subconsciously, and acted cold and uncaring. He didn't take questioning him as some kind of insult. He explained what he knew and was open to what he didn't know, and was open to the fact that the system has flaws, there's good and bad people in it. He knew because a lot of his patients came from experts that gave them the wrong advice. He knew. And I only found a good shrink because I was willing to go to a private clinic and I deeply researched his credentials before. If you want to go to a shrink, you can do that. They're not all bad. But first, try talking to your parents, because you are the combined genetic efforts of your parents, and they know you better than you think. If you don't have parents, talk to a priest. They at least try to provoke the growth of your intuition if they're a good priest. They at least try to work with your heart instead of just using protocols to diagnose your mind. Try these things, and if you are offended by the mere notion, well, then you know that's what you're afraid of. That's your problem. You're so arrogant that you think nobody else can teach you anything, especially people who you don't agree with. Well, I wasted too many years of my life making those mistakes myself, and I don't want you to make them either. So, try to refrain from shopping, taking loans, having credit, filling your void with items. Try to refrain from drug use of all kinds. Try to keep your mind so clear that you can feel your suffering enough that you start to understand where it comes from, because you're actually moving towards it, seeking to embrace it and understand it, and you're not just pushing it away. And just so you know, sitting too much in front of a computer, using technology, that is a drug. It releases dopamine. It makes me feel like when I drink too much coffee, smoke too much weed. There's no difference. Social media is as much of a novelty-seeking behavior that flushes dopamine, some people abuse learning and knowledge and reading interesting things to make themselves feel better and distract themselves from problems. I'm not sure you should always distract yourself from your bad feelings. You should probably stay in them long enough to learn something from them, but not wallow in them and make them your identity or start to embrace them as something more than what they are. All of your negative emotions and your thoughts are just symbols. Read the text on the screen, pause it if you have to, because it can explain better than I am capable of right now. You don't want to worship symbols, but you might want to understand what they represent so that you can remove them out of your life. Disattachment in a healthy way. I hope this at least helps some people understand what the problem is with being too spoiled, having it too good, and always seeking happiness, because it cuts you off from suffering that could lead to growth. And this applies to people no matter what financial background that they have. I use stereotypes to convey a point when I talk about being a rich kid without being a rich kid, when I talk about middle class upbringing. What I talk about applies to a lot of people, because there's a lot of people in poor areas with poor backgrounds who also suffer from drug abuse. I've seen too much of it, and I've learned that abuse and addiction can take many different forms, and it usually has the same root cause: unresolved forms of trauma, as in bad experiences that left an imprint, left a mark. Trauma doesn't just mean that someone was sexually assaulted. Something as little as bullying or neglect can actually damage your brain as well. But it's a good thing that we now have research on neuroplasticity, because it means that you can always change. It is never too late to change. It is never too late to heal. At least that's what science says. Take it from a smartass. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll try to make more uplifting content in the future. Have a nice day.